Welcome to the show, Liz.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Now, what's your sober date?
So if I'm following the rules of sobriety dates, it is May 30th of this year. However, that was because of a relapse on marijuana for a month. 420 kind of got me. And so before that, because that was the only thing that I relapsed on, but regardless, it's a relapse. Before that, my sober date from like alcohol and methamphetamine and all that stuff is April 7th of last year.
Oh, okay. So you got like a year and a half in you then.
Yeah.
Is cannabis legal where you're at?
It is not. Medically, yes, and apparently it's not very hard to get a medical card, but I learned quite a few lessons in that relapse about like my addiction itself and what it does to me, and just learned that it's better to not go that route.
Did you spend a lot of money in that month?
No, actually, it was more like the what do I want to call it? Like first thought wrong and like just I don't know, personality changes that happen. I was a really ritualistic user when I was using like everything. And I noticed that when I started smoking weed again, that if my ritual of smoking got interrupted, I got real pissed real fast. And that was not something that I like to see in myself. I also was using every day, which I feel is not necessary, but I was doing it because I wanted to, and apparently I could. And I think a lot of it had to do with the people that I was surrounding myself with too. You know, the people that I were hanging around with were people who were drinkers and weed smokers, you know, and I thought that I was strong enough to say no, or that, you know, if I decided because I had a goal to meet my 1 year and then reevaluate and see if, you know, it was going to be something that I could allow myself to do and not get lost in. And I didn't really do much evaluating and just kind of took advantage of the opportunity, I guess you could call it, a bad one, but the opportunity to smoke on 420 this last year. So, and then it just kind of spiraled into a month full of weed smoking and not getting things done on time and not wanting to clean my house and all that stuff.
So what was going on April of 2021 or 2021 that you decided to quit everything?
Probation. So I was in a really, really bad spot. I used for probably a total of 10 years, I think it was. You know, it started with the drinking and the weed smoking in college, and then it progressed to the harder drugs. And I primarily used meth for probably, I would say 6 or 7 of maybe even 8 of those 10 years. And I did good for a while as far as not catching charges that were too serious or not having to be on probation. And then made some choices to be with the wrong people. And the person that I was driving a vehicle for took their bag out of their pocket, which it was their vehicle, but they didn't have a license. And that got me into a lot of trouble in my using days. Hey, Liz, you have a license. Will you drive? Oh, yeah, of course. Except for when it came down to situations like what got me on probation for the felony charge, because he took probably, I don't know, a decent amount, excuse me, of meth out of his pocket and shoved it between the seat and the door. And because I was the driver of the vehicle in the state of Iowa, as the driver, you are responsible for everyone and everything in that car. So even if it's not your vehicle, you're charged with whatever drugs are in there. I've heard of people getting charged with other people's open containers. Like it's a pretty strict law.
The open containers, I understand, but especially when a car is registered to the person that.
Right. And that's what I had said too.
Let's backtrack. So you didn't start drinking until in college?
Correct.
Now, what made you be such a late bloomer?
So I have 3 younger siblings, and I'm the oldest. And I did a lot of growing up a little bit too fast. As far as like wanting to break the rules, I never really did until I went to college. I respected my parents a lot. My mom and my stepdad raised me. And my stepdad is a wonderful, wonderful human being. And he taught me a lot of the things that I know about everyday life, just like growing up, you know, standing next to him while he's grilling supper and just talking about things. And he was kind of learning as he went when he was raising me. And I just kind of followed in his footsteps as much as I could and did what I was asked and didn't really break the rules and didn't really have a desire to. One of my least favorite feelings in the entire world, and it has been my whole life, is the feeling of getting caught. Whether it's getting caught doing something bad, whether it's getting caught setting up a surprise party for somebody, I don't like the angst that I get when I feel like I'm going to get caught doing something.
That makes sense. So you didn't even, did you have friends that drank, or no, you surrounded yourself by people who didn't drink either?
So in high school, I had friends that drank, but they also knew that I wasn't that type of person, and it was really hard to be able to get me out of the house to like be able to go to parties. You know, my parents were pretty strict, and I was in cheerleading, so I didn't want to risk that. I think I maybe went to one party in high school and had like a screwdriver with like a half a shot of vodka in it. I mean, it wasn't anything like out of the ordinary. And I only had it because this really cute boy that was an upperclassman poured it for me. So of course I was like, oh yes, I'll have a drink. Yeah, and I had some other stuff going on in high school that I guess was more it was more at the forefront of my mind than drinking and partying. I was still kind of discovering myself and my sexuality and that kind of stuff. So like I had a girlfriend in high school, and but I was a theater and cheerleader, and yeah, I was just a little bit mix of everything. So
Yeah, you were all over the place.
oh yeah, just trying to figure myself out.
Now, did you leave state to go to college, or did you stay in state, like live at home and go to college?
I stayed in state, but I didn't live at home. So I went to Iowa Central Community College, which is in Fort Dodge, Iowa. And I'm originally from a very teeny tiny town called Manning. And so it was like an hour and, oh, my friends are going to give me crap about this. I'm going to say it's an hour and 15, hour and 30, depending on how fast you drive. And it's a really nice, for being a community college, it's a really nice campus. And they had dorms on site, and their theater program was huge. I was part of that in college too. And I remember my mom, when I was like looking for colleges, because I had applied to a few out of state and didn't get into any of them. My GPA wasn't the best in high school. It's not that I'm not smart. I just don't do well on like getting homework done and on time, and I'm a very abstract thinker, so my answers were never what the teacher wanted, and I suck at math. When I told my mom I wanted to go to Fort Dodge, she kind of looked at me all confused, and she was like, "You want to go to Dirty Dodge?" And I was like, "What did you just say to me?" She's like, "That's what they called it when I was growing up. I don't know if it's the same way." And we went and checked out the campus. She's like, "Wow, this is nice." So that's where I went. I stayed on campus for the first semester and then ended up moving in with somebody. So
Well, that's a quick progression. Now, how long into college before you tried drinking again?
the first week, I think. I mean, yeah. So because I didn't have my parents, this is what I'm thinking has happened in my little developing 18-year-old brain. So because I didn't have my parents right there, like telling me when to do my homework, when to go eat supper, when to, come home for the night, I'm like, I can do whatever I want. And I ended up staying out all night all the time, ended up drinking, ended up, just ridiculous, stupid things. And it was like a quick progression, but I never really like jumped into anything super terrible. And I guess I was smoking cigarettes this whole time too. Like my stepdad found out I started smoking cigarettes like the summer after my senior year, or maybe before, I don't remember. But I wasn't like a heavy smoker. But nonetheless, I was smoking cigarettes. And so like that was really the only thing I ever did like for the first couple of months was smoke a cigarette on campus. But otherwise I was off campus drinking, and then I would either stay with the friends or I'd go back and stumble into my room and fall asleep. But yeah, it didn't take long at all after I left for college to go drink and party.
What made you want to start smoking cigarettes if you weren't partying?
Because my friends that I were hanging out with smoked cigarettes, and it was just one of those, like, I got in the car one morning, my friend had picked me up, because she would pick me up and then we'd go cruise the drag, and she would have a cigarette before school. And there was one morning that I got in the car and I was just super, super pissed off already. And she was like, "Do you want one of these? It might make you feel better." And I was like, "I mean, it does smell kind of good. Okay, I'll try it." And yeah, that was downhill from there. So
Do you still smoke today?
I vape now. I quit smoking cigarettes probably 6 months after I got out of treatment. And I mean, I'll still have one every once in a while, just because my boyfriend smokes, and quite a few people that I'm, at the NA meetings afterwards, everybody's outside having a cigarette, but I stick pretty well to my vape. So.
Well, that's good then.
Yeah. And I've dropped my nicotine level in my juice down to 3 instead of 6. So hopefully someday I'll be able to quit. But for now, I need that security blanket.
Like, now I still smoke. I used to smoke 2 packs a day as of like 2 months ago.
Oh, man.
So now I'm down to like 3 packs a week.
Nice. Good job.
And I chew a ton of nicotine gum.
Yeah.
But nicotine gum is actually good for you.
Really?
Yeah. There's a lot of health benefits to chewing nicotine gum, because nicotine isn't bad for you. It just what makes it addicting. It's the tar and the tobacco that makes it cancerous. It's not the nicotine itself is just addicting, but it's not actually not actually bad for you. It increases, like, it wakes you up. It increases your dopamine levels still, though, so you're still alert. And for me, I feel more alert, and I never yawn when I'm chewing a piece of Nicorette gum. So I'll be chewing gum all during work because I can't go outside and smoke while I'm working. So I'll chew Nicorette gum the entire day during work. So you find drinking, and who did you move in with after the first semester? Friends?
A boyfriend. I am a repeat offender of moving in with guys way too fast. So that was the first instance that I moved in way too fast. And this guy was, I met him on campus. Well, I saw him on campus once, and he was going to school, and then he dropped out. And he didn't tell me that he wasn't going to school. So for the first couple weeks of us hanging out, I just assumed that he got out of class earlier than I did. And we would meet back at his apartment and hang out. And by that point, I think I had started smoking weed a little bit. So that was kind of what we did together, was get done with class, get some food, go get high. And it was just a really tight knit group of friends that we had. We had some mutual friends that were hanging out together, and that's kind of how we got hooked up. And so I moved in with him the second semester of the first year, and then him and I dated for 4 years to the day after that. And it was not good. It wasn't horrible. It wasn't bad compared to my later on relationships. There was no physical abuse, but he was definitely a mentally abusive person. And we both were very much falling into addiction quicker than we could realize. He was who I used most every drug that I've ever tried. He was who I used it first with. And we had parties at our house, at the apartment. We had a party at his apartment one night we had people, if they wanted to, granted, this is if they wanted to, for a college that had most people 22 and younger, sign in a book when they walked into our apartment. And we counted 300 names. that was just the people who wanted to sign in, like, or the people who knew that it was there. It was crazy.
So that's where you fell into drinking, but you used, what made you want to try other things? Just, would he present it to you and you say, yeah, I'll try that? Or did you present him with things?
I think it was kind of we had a couple mutual friends that were of the drug dealing variety. Like, most of what they did was just dealing pot to people. But every once in a while, a big time pot dealer will meet the ecstasy dealer or meet the whatever, and they get a little something just for themselves. Well, I distinctly remember the first time, I think I only did ecstasy like once or twice. But the first time that I ever did it, it was that boyfriend that I was with, and then a mutual friend of ours, sitting at our dining room table. This was second year of college, okay? And we lived in a really, really nice big house in Fort Dodge with a couple of people that we had met in the apartment complex that he lived in the year before. We had become friends. We decided that when we were moving back, we were going to find a house together, and then we could do whatever we wanted. And so we're living in this house with these two guys that we met in the apartment complex. They each had their own room. And then obviously me and my boyfriend shared a room. Huge, gorgeous house. And like, everybody picked up after themselves. But like, when I walked in that day after school, it was immaculate clean. And I was like, something's up here. Like, what's going on? And my boyfriend at the time and our friend were sitting at the end of the kitchen table, and our friend just looks at me and he's got this goofy ass smile on his face. And I kind of looked at my boyfriend and I was like, what's going on here? And our buddy goes, he like gestures down to the table and he's like, you want to try some ecstasy? And I was like, okay, how can I say no? Like, that was the best offer for drugs I've ever gotten in my life. So, yeah, needless to say, that night I may have partaken in some use of ecstasy, which I didn't really see the big woohoo about it. I mean, like, yeah, I was in a good mood, but I was also drinking, smoking weed, hanging out with my friends. Like,
yeah, I've only done ecstasy like 3 times. And each time I was called out on it, not by family or anything, but by friends, because of the dumb grin on my face.
Right.
So I remember the first time I tried ecstasy, I was like laying on my couch. I had work the next morning, and my 2 friends came in because they had a key to my apartment because I would lock myself out all the time. And they came in and they're like, you want to go out? And I'm like, no, I got like work in the morning. And he had like a whole baggie of them. He's like,
God.
He's like, I got ecstasy to sell. And I was like, I'm not doing it. I got work in the morning. And then my other friend was like, so this is going to be a drug that I've tried that you haven't? And I was like, fuck it, give me 2.
Right. Now you just challenged me. Like,
yeah, that was the biggest piece of peer pressure I could ever think of. So that was your little bout with ecstasy. Now, what would you consider your drug of choice? Was it the meth?
I think that due to the addictive nature and the fact that it was an entire lifestyle, yeah. Unfortunately, my drug of choice became meth really quickly. It started with coke and then it turned to meth real fast because coke is a rich man's drug and I was not rich. Yeah, so it turned into a pretty bad spiel of using the dope for a long time.
Now, would you want meth for 10 years, or is that just when your drinking started at like 19?
See, that's when my drinking started. I didn't start using like, I did like ecstasy and shrooms and like, I don't know, all the stuff that people would consider not quite as bad as like meth and heroin. I did all of that before I was like 20, 21. And then I think between 21 and 22 is when I started using coke. And that only lasted for about 6 or 7 months until our dealer was out of town. We got a bag from somebody else and it was cut with meth. And then after that, it was like there was no going back.
What was it for you that made it like that quick of a change? Like, this is the only thing I want.
See, and that's a good question, because I ask myself that sometimes, because every time that I tried any sort of upper, my first experience with it was awful. I hated it. I was super paranoid. I was like, so the very first upper I ever did was in college. I took a friend who was prescribed Concerta. She gave me one. So like one of those super strong ADHD meds. I took one of those, and it was the very first time I had been up for more than like 16 hours on end. I was up for like 26 hours, and that was ungodly to me. I was like, this is not okay, and I'm starting to freak out. I tried to go to class like an idiot. I tried to go to class and couldn't go because I couldn't even walk all the way across campus without thinking people were following me. So, and the same thing with Coke. The first night I was up on Coke was not that great. Like, I didn't really feel anything, but I didn't snort it. I rubbed it on my gums, because in the beginning of my like partying days, I wouldn't even stay in the same room as somebody who snorted something, because I didn't like the sound of it. And so when they broke out the Coke the first night that I had tried it, my girlfriend that was with me was like, you could just do it, or you could maybe rub it on your gums. And I was like, okay, rub it on my gums. That sounds cool. That sounds safe. Doesn't sound like I'm going to mess anything up, you know?
This podcast is also sponsored by BetterHelp. If you are looking for therapy and not able to get something right away locally, you can do that with them. Within 48 hours, you can find a therapist to get on telehealth with you. I mean, I haven't heard anything but great things from people that have already done it, that watch my show or listen to my show. If you're looking to get 10% off your first month, you can go to betterhelp.com/MJSPNPMCA. That is betterhelp.com/MJSPNPMCA.
And then I was like awake, but I didn't really feel anything, you know?
It's a low dose.
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. So then when it switched to the meth again, the first night that I like did meth or whatever, it was with that same boyfriend that I was with for 4 years, and he fell asleep. Like, he had history using drugs before he was with me. And so he must have just been used to it. I don't know. He also had a painkiller problem. So like, I don't know if he had been like that deep into the painkillers at that time or what, but, so he fell asleep, and I'm laying in bed like, what do I do now? Like, we live in town. I can't just get up and go do the dishes in the middle of the night or whatever. Like, people are going to see the lights are on and wonder what the hell's happening. But yeah, it was just after that, it was, it's just what was around. It's crazy how, like for the beginning of my drug use days, it was me and that boyfriend. And then whoever was with us, like it was me and him and everybody else. And then when him and I ended up breaking up, we had lived in a house in my hometown. Really weird setup. Me, my dad, my ex-girlfriend from high school, remember me mentioning her, and my current boyfriend all lived in the same house. So that was fun. But it just, as soon as we moved into that house, for some reason, it was just like all there was around me was that. And all there was around me was people wanting to use meth. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, so I just went with it, and I grew to be a very heavy meth user.
Were you smoking or snorting it, even though you were against snorting? Did you eventually give in to snorting?
I did. So I did that whole thing, that like the classic meth user thing, where I was like, oh, I'll just snort it. It's not that bad if you snort it. I'll never smoke it. And then I started smoking it. But that's really all the further I got with it. I mean, I did like hot rails and stuff, but I never used needles or anything. I knew a lot of people who did, but I didn't ever get into that part of it. I felt like if I was going to shoot something into my veins, I was going to find a way to do it with THC, because that's how much I deeply love marijuana. But again, that's just the whole thing with addiction. So I never got into the needles, but I did.
Yeah, I was into painkillers too much.
Oh yeah.
I never even did heroin because I was so into painkillers that, my justification was,
Right.
yeah, I do pills every day, but I'm not shooting dope.
Right.
So it could be worse. So that, it kept me in addiction. I was addicted to painkillers for a decade. I was
Oh
an
my.
I was an alcoholic for 20 years. I started at 12.
Oh my God.
So you can see the juxtaposition to your story being a late bloomer. By the time I was 22, I was like, all right, I'm done with alcohol. I found pills. And it's the only thing I want.
Right.
So
Right.
it just goes to show you where we can both end up. And I was strictly a downer person. Like ecstasy was my like upper, acid was an upper kind of, but it gave you like a good body high too. Um,
Yep.
I was really into I was really into acid, shrooms, and ecstasy all at the same time. And
Oh.
they were all before I found pills. I was experimenting with like everything, and then once I found pills, it was off to the races. It
Right.
would be the only thing I did. I mean, I kept drinking here and there, but I was to keep up appearances. Like
Yeah.
JD's not on high; he's just drunk, and that was like my whole thing. Um, so you were mostly a smoker. Now, how many rehabs did you have to go to?
Just one. Thank God.
Now, what
Just
brought you to that
one.
rehab?
So I was on probation for that very large amount of drugs that was not mine. And but I feel like that's kind of one of those things that you let go and let God. Like I had been thinking for quite a while that I was just ready to be done. I just didn't know how to go about it. And I wasn't a person, even though I was homeless and was just struggling to pay for even food for my dog, food for myself, my cigarettes. Like, I mean, I didn't have a job. It was just rough. And I'd been thinking for a while that I just wanted to be done. But I didn't know how to go about it. Well, then I catch this charge and I get put on probation and I keep dropping dirty for my probation officer. And he was probably one of the best correctional officials that I have ever met in my life. He sat and listened to me. He asked the right questions. He tried to understand addiction because like he had never really dealt with it himself. And when I put it in a scenario like this and I said, listen, what if you wake up someday and you find out that coffee is now a scheduled substance and you are no longer allowed to have your coffee in the morning or throughout the day or whatever? He's like, okay. I was like, yeah. Now I understood, and so anyway, I digress. I'm a rambler.
Well, question,
He
how did you become homeless, and how are you affording your habit while you were homeless?
So I became homeless because well, first and foremost, because I continued to use drugs. I truly believe that if I had not been making the choices that I was making because of the drugs I was using, I would have had a good handful of people that would have let me live with them or in their house until I got my shit together. But my problem was I wasn't ready to get my shit together. And so that house that we lived in Manning with that glorious bunch of people that I'm not really sure how that happened. Dad left with his girlfriend at the time, just up and left, moved somewhere else. I had broken up with that boyfriend, so that was like right around 4 years of me and him being together, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And then the ex-girlfriend that also lived in the house ended up getting arrested. And so it was just me to take care of this entire house full of shit that belonged to everybody else. And I ended up getting an old friend of mine from Carroll, which is like the town where I kind of hang out at. It's where I live now. I had them come with me back down to Manning, which is like 20 miles or so. And we just cleaned out the house as best we could and then grabbed my cat that I had at the time and a few of my belongings and came back to town. And that was pretty much the start of my homelessness. I had places that I stayed for whatever lengths of time. Some of them were better than others. But I never had anywhere that like I truly felt comfortable like leaving all my belongings there, or anywhere that like I was guaranteed to get in the door no matter what time of day or night. Like that was a struggle for me. So, but it was all ultimately because of the choices I was making. So
Now, and were you working during this time?
I was not. I tried to a little bit. And like, I guess there was a short span of time where I lived with a friend of mine in his trailer. I lived there for probably 2 years or so. And we had a pretty decent like situation going on there. He had a daughter that he was raising who like wasn't biologically his, I guess, but like him and the baby mom were on and off or whatever. So I helped him take care of her, and I cleaned the house, and I made supper, and we basically played house for a while. So I didn't really have to pay rent, and I didn't have to work. He paid the bills and let me stay there as long as I helped with the baby, and because we got along, and that was a nice little setup there for a while. But then just like everybody else, the drugs kind of take over, and bad decisions are made, and I didn't live there anymore.
So, how did you support your habit of doing meth every day?
Well, I either was peddling, so like I'd get just a little bit from whoever I knew was kind of the dealer, and I would, sell 20, 30 out of it to whatever person that showed up where I was at needed, because when you're using like that, everybody needs some. Nobody ever has any, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I would just kind of use that to my advantage, and that's just kind of how I made my way, was by peddling like
Small
8
time.
balls basically.
That makes a lot of sense, though, that you would just turn to like, hey, if I'll get rid of some for you if you can give me some kind of deal.
Yeah.
That makes sense. You probably got them fronted to you.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good at manipulating.
I can be, yeah. I really tried not to, though. Like, I remember thinking a lot to myself in my active addiction, like, am I lying to this person, or like, am I using them in a way that I shouldn't be? Because I really I've always prided myself on being like an honest person and like a decent human being, even in my using days, which I made some shitty decisions, but I really have always tried.
It's hard to be an honest drug addict.
Right, exactly. Like with the homies, I was honest. You know what I mean? Like family, not so much. Police, obviously not. But with the homies, I tried to be pretty straight up, pretty straightforward, and like I never stole drugs from anybody. I never like sold my body for it, like nothing like that.
Now, your first charge that you ever got, was that for that driving with that amount in your car? Well, not your car.
No. So I had multiple paraphernalia charges. There was kind of a running joke that Liz was the only person who would get caught with everything you needed to use drugs, but never any drugs. Like, I was one of those stupid people that for the longest time I carried like a weed pipe with me until I learned how to roll a joint, and then it was just papers. But like I would always have like a dope pipe with me, and like baggies, and just stupid stuff that just screams I'm a meth user in my purse. Like, so I got caught a couple of times with like baggies on me, or like a vehicle that I had been driving that belonged to my grandpa had all of my stuff in it, because yet again, I had been kicked out of somewhere I was staying, had to find somewhere else to go. And I was in one of my, all right, I'm just going to get a job and get my life straightened out. I don't have to stop using drugs. I can just get a job to afford something, and then maybe I can move in with somebody and actually pay rent, and then they can't kick me out. Like, just trying to problem solve any way that I could. And I walked out of the library, which is right next to the cop shop here in town. And my parents had filed a like driving without owner's consent or something like that. Basically, they had gotten in cahoots with the police in the town that I was in, and got me arrested for driving without consent. And then the vehicle got searched, and so there were like little baggies with weed in it, little baggies with meth in it, like probably a pipe or something, I don't know. And so I got paraphernalia charges out the nose, but I never got charged with drugs. So
weed's
yeah,
always
that was
bystander.
right. Yeah.
Weed's like, I'm not the reason you're in trouble, but I'm gonna be the reason you're gonna stay in trouble.
Right, exactly. Especially because like another one of those dumb things that I did, like I would carry my weed in like a pill bottle or a glass jar. Like if I had a bunch of it, I would have it in like a sealable glass jar. And I learned after one of those paraphernalia charges that when the cops weigh whatever you have that has like substance residue on it, they weigh the whole damn thing, and that's what you get charged with. So one time I actually got out of a like 52-gram weed charge or something because I had a giant glass jar that had weed residue in it, and they just weigh the container and then count it all. I was like, that's not fair. Like, we all know glass weighs way more than weed. Like,
yeah, like one of my best friends is a glass blower, so
yeah, dude, that's something I wish I could do still. Like, I got hella good at that when I was using, and I wish that I could do that now, like, sober.
What,
that's so
glass?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, she teaches it. She's a teacher during the week, and then she has her own studio that she has in Philly. And
that is so cool.
There's been many nights where I've been like just high as shit watching her blow glass.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the whole, like, so you'd be high on dope, you'd drop your pipe, and you're like, oh, now we gotta fix it. So you break out the torch and you like seal it off and blow it. And I got really good at that. But like, I just binge watched a whole glass blowing like contest show on Netflix, and it just blows my mind, like the way that you have to go about it, and like, yeah, it's so cool.
So what made you do you think that it worked this time? Had you tried to quit before, like on your own?
So I had tried to like cut down, and then like it was while I was still giving those dirty tests to my probation officer that I was like, all right, maybe if I like don't use as much, then it won't show up. Or like if I only use this day, you know, just trying to work it out however I could so I didn't have to totally quit. And I did stop for like a few days. I think one time in between my monthly visits, I stopped for like 4 days before I went and saw my PO, and I still pissed dirty. But I never really like tried to quit on my own, you know, like, and there were times where I'm like, oh, I'm better now. Like, I don't feel like I need to get high all day, every day. But it was just because I was doing things that I enjoyed, you know, and I was staying too busy outside of somebody's house or bedroom to want to get high, you know, like that was part of the whole reason that I continued to use drugs was to not feel things. I've had a lot of shitty things happen. I've had a lot of death that I've had to deal with that I just chose not to by getting high still. And so I was just trying to self-medicate. And so the more I sat around, the more I wanted to get high.
That makes sense. The numbing thing. Now, what makes you today not want to feel numb because like in sobriety, you face some of your biggest challenges that you've ever had to face.
Yeah.
And, you know, to get through those, like, have you had anything substantial happen since you've been sober that you had to like get yourself through sober?
So yeah, I've dealt with a couple deaths. One of them being kind of sudden. My uncle passed away of like a heart attack or a blood clot or something. And so that was kind of rough. And like just relationships in general, like feeling my feelings is something that I used to love. Because I was a really happy person and I didn't really have a whole lot of like sad stuff that happened to me. or like things that, you know, I never really got very angry until I started using. And then I just started exploding about things, and I've never really gotten rid of that. So like if I get real pissed now, I'll start throwing shit and I'll start like yelling real loud, calling names. And yeah, I'm not a very nice person to be around when I'm angry. But I guess it, you know, I've made it through a lot really that that I would have once wanted to have gotten high over. And I'm not going to say that I didn't think about it now. Every once in a while, I still think about, like, you know, when I'm bored or when I'm like really, I don't know, there are just certain times where I'm like, man, I kind of want to get high right now. But I know that it's not a good decision. I know that I'm not going to do it just one time. And I just gotta I call my sponsor, I talk to my boyfriend who's also in recovery, I call my mom, like I just talk to somebody about it.
I was just going to ask what's different about this relationship than the others, but it sounds like you both are sober, and that's kind of like what bonds you.
Yeah. So we used together, and now we're sober together. And so the like cutesy, adorable, kind of makes me want to throw up thing about him is that when we first started hanging out, like I think I met him probably only 3 or 4 years into my using, so like I hadn't even really been using meth that much or anything, but I've known him for like 7 or 8 years. Anyway, so when we first met and started hanging out, he had told me one night that the only thing he ever wanted to be in his life was a dad. And as soon as that happened for him, he would drop all of the bullshit. He would stop using the drugs. He would stop running around being an idiot, and he would be a dad. And that's not exactly how it happened, but he did have a girlfriend before me when he went into prison this last time who had gotten pregnant, and he now has a beautiful daughter whose life I also get to be a part of. And I'm friends with his baby mom as well. And like, it's a really civil situation that we have. But just seeing the way that he is with her is like, I believe him now. When he said that forever ago, I believe him. And he's doing a really good job. So that's a few things that are different, I guess.
I would say so. I mean, your life sounds completely different than it was 5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You're not putting anyone's life in danger. You're not driving high. You're not, because
right.
You know, you were just basically living where couch surfing for a while with no real like place to call home, and now you got your own place again, and you have a good relationship, and not where you're using together, but where you're talking about things and you're feeling your feelings.
Yeah.
These are all positive things to have right now.
Yeah, for sure.
And I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me. We finally got our schedules to work. And
yeah.
It's different when you're on different time zones. It's hard
that too. I think that's cool though. Like, what's the weather like out there for you guys right now?
Rainy.
Rainy? It's sunny here, but it's real cold. It's been like brisk the past couple of days, but tomorrow it's supposed to be nicer again. So
one of my favorite shows takes place in Iowa, kind of.
Oh, really?
American Pickers.
Oh, yep.
They're out of the Claire.
I don't remember where they're out of, but yeah, I forgot they film a lot in Iowa.
Yeah, LeClaire is the name of the town because these are my favorite hockey players, so I always remember that name.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But I appreciate you sitting down, Liz, and being so open and honest about your history, because yours is different than others because you were a late bloomer. So, you know, you're going to find other people. I think you're the, like, third person. I've done 130 of these, and I think you're, like, the third person that was a late bloomer. Everybody else is, like, 10, 11, 12, 13, and you're like, no, I was 21, and that was
right, yeah.
So it just goes to show you there's other people out there like you that your story can resonate with them, and it can show how fast the progression of addiction can really go.
For sure. Yeah. Downhill fast.
Yep. But now look at you. You got, you know.
I know.
Well, you have 6 months clean technically.
Let's see, May. I think I've got 5 months, maybe just about 5 months.
Okay, but still. And again, that was from weed after a month. Now, were you with your friend when you had that relapse with weed?
No, I was not. I was actually I was with a different guy at the time. And that's something else that kind of, I don't know, played into it all. If we ever get to talk again, I'll fill you in on it. But no, it was a whole different circle of people. My boyfriend that I have now was still in prison at the time. So
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that someday.
all right.
Thanks, Liz.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good rest of your day. Go Phillies.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.